A mother and her young daughter go camping in the remote Texas desert and never return. For 11 long years, the world puzzled over what happened to them, but one fateful day, her son makes a discovery no one expected. A discovery buried deep in the sand that will reveal the shocking truth about their disappearance. This is a true story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about survival, betrayal, and the dangers that lurk in the desert. Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been missed in the search for his mother and sister. Every time he thought about it, every time he tried to understand how his family could simply disappear into the desert, a part of him couldn't accept the official conclusion that they were lost and never coming back. It was like a puzzle piece was missing. He'd been searching for years, but it always felt like he was being led in circles. It was time to take a different approach, and Jackson had only one area to check, one place where no one had looked beyond the Shenandoah Mountains, deep in the heart of the desert. He turned to his best friend, Derek, who sat in the front of the Jeep, adjusting his sunglasses against the blazing Texas sun. Derek had been with him through every failed search, every moment of doubt, every dead end. Yet Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that they were so close. The desert stretched on forever, a sea of cracked earth and jagged rocks that seemed to go on forever. It was a place where the sun felt like a constant, oppressive weight pressing down on him, and the air tasted of dust and dry heat. Jackson Carter wiped the sweat from his brow, adjusting the metal detector in his hands. His gaze was fixed on the ground, scanning methodically. The low hum of the device was almost drowned out by the silence of the desert. Next to him, his best friend, Derek Dawson, moved a little more leisurely, his eyes scanning the horizon, taking in the rugged beauty of the West Texas landscape. Derek wasn't so obsessed with finding something buried in the earth. He was more interested in the adventure itself, the thrill of being out in nature. But Jackson was different. Jackson wasn't just looking for relics. He wasn't just in the desert because he loved the land. No, for Jackson, this place was personal. It was a place where the memories of his mother and sister were buried, along with the questions that had plagued him for over a decade. "Dude, you're on a roll today," Derek said, kicking up a cloud of dust as he paused to take a sip from a bottle of water. "What are you hoping to find? Ancient coins, maybe a lost relic from a century ago?" Jackson didn't look up. His focus never wavered. "I'm looking for answers, Derek. Not relics." Derek froze, his brows drawing together. He knew about Jackson's search. It wasn't something Jackson was hiding, of course, but so much time had passed that the weight of it all seemed to settle over both of them in a way neither of them could ignore. Jackson's mother, Sir Ellen Carter, and his younger sister Lily had disappeared in the mountains of Chennai more than 11 years ago. One moment they were going on a camping trip together, and the next they were gone. No bodies, no sign of a struggle, just an empty campsite and the echoes of unanswered questions. The police gave up after several years. They even suggested that Ellen had simply decided to leave, to abandon her life in search of something new. Jackson had never believed that. His mother, a loving, devoted woman, could not have simply disappeared, leaving her family behind. And Lily, his little sister, was only 5 years old. She would never have left willingly. No, Jackson was certain of one thing. They had not simply disappeared. They had been taken. But by whom and why? A year had passed since Jackson had resumed the search. A year since he and Derek had returned to the desert, hoping that this time they would find something that would lead them to the truth. 11 years, Derek, Jackson said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. It's been 11 years since they just disappeared. Search parties, the police, the endless interrogations. Every volunteer scouring the land. And for what? Nothing. Everyone gave up. Derek didn't know how to answer. He couldn't understand the depth of Jackson's pain. He couldn't even imagine what it was like to lose his mother and sister. To wake up every day knowing that the people who meant everything to you were out there somewhere, just lost. "I know it was hard, man," Derek said after a moment, his voice softening. "But you have to understand, the cops did the best they could. It's not their fault." Jackson paused. The words caught in his throat. He didn't look at Derek and didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he spoke, his voice strained but firm. "I don't believe they just disappeared. I can't. I know they're out there somewhere. Maybe I've been wrong all these years, but I can't accept it. They wouldn't just leave us like this." Jackson's grip on the metal detector tightened, his fingers almost white on the handle. Derek looked at his friend, his face hard to read. It was clear that this obsession was starting to consume Jackson, and Derek didn't know how long he could watch it consume him. The search had taken a toll on their friendship. There were moments when Derek wondered if Jackson even remembered who he used to be. Jackson, who joked, who could laugh without forcing it. "You know," Derek said, trying to lighten the mood, "I think something might be right. I mean, I don't know what happened to them, but something's not right." "But maybe," Derek paused, unsure of how to word it. "Maybe you're just chasing ghosts, man. Maybe it's time to move on." Jackson's head snapped up, his expression hard. "I can't move on, Derek. I won't. They deserve better. I deserve better. We deserve better." His voice cracked at the end, and Derek's stomach clenched at the raw hurt in his friend's words. "I understand," Derek said after a long pause, his tone softening. "But be careful. You can't keep digging yourself into a hole forever. You have to make sure you don't lose yourself in this." Jackson didn't answer right away. The sun was high now, mercilessly hot, and the only sound was the low hum of the metal detector combing the desert floor. Jackson's eyes scanned the barren land before them, but his mind was far away, lost in memories of the days when everything was normal, when Ellen and Lily were close by and life was simple before the desert swallowed them whole. "Let's continue," Jackson said. Finally, his voice was distant but determined. "There's something here. I know it. I feel it." "Derek, I think this is it," Jackson said, his voice quiet but full of urgency. "This is the area they missed. No one's looked here." Derek raised an eyebrow, glancing at him. "Are you sure? This place is very remote. There is no cell phone reception and the terrain is rough. We could be out there for hours, maybe longer." Jackson's eyes never left the road ahead. "I know it sounds crazy, but they can't just disappear without a trace. I can feel it, Derek. There's something out there. We're going deeper, a little further." Derek hesitated for a moment. The last few searches had taken a toll on both of them, physically and emotionally. But he could see the obsession in Jackson's eyes. He knew that nothing short of this last search would give Jackson the peace he needed. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The Jeep rumbled over the cracked desert ground, its wheels kicking up dust as they drove deeper into the wilderness. The surrounding landscape seemed endless, a vast expanse of dry land, broken only by craggy mountains and scattered boulders. The air was growing hotter here, the sun beating down like an inexorable force. It was as if the desert was trying to swallow them whole, as it had done to so many before them. Hours passed, and there was nothing to see except sand and rocks and the occasional creosote bush. Derek's unease grew as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. "We're taking a chance, man. We should get back before it gets dark. It's too dangerous out here." Jackson barely heard him, lost in his thoughts. He'd driven through this desert so many times, and yet each time something told him that there was one more piece of history left to uncover. He was starting to feel it in his bones. The feeling that they were getting closer. His mother and sister weren't just missing. Someone was hiding something, and today he was going to find it. They kept driving. The rocky terrain grew more challenging, slowing the Jeep. As they crested a ridge, Jackson's eyes narrowed as he scanned the ground below. A glint of something metallic caught his eye, half hidden by the dust and brush of the desert. His heart started beating faster. "Derek," he whispered, almost in disbelief. "Look over there." Derek squinted and followed Jackson's gaze. The glint grew clearer as it came closer. "What is that?" he murmured. The uncertainty in his voice matched the uneasiness growing in his stomach. Jackson's pulse quickened. He didn't need to speak. He knew exactly what it was. The familiar shape of the overturned truck stuck awkwardly at the bottom of the ravine was unmistakable. His mother's truck, the one they'd been driving the day they'd disappeared. A beat-up Chevy Tahoe. Old, but unmistakable. Its blue and orange mountain decals were barely visible beneath the dirt from years of desert exposure. That's Mom's truck," Jackson breathed. His voice was barely a whisper, but it rang with a mixture of hope and fear. His hands shook slightly as he tightened his grip on the wheel, steering the Jeep down the rocky slope toward the ravine. Derek was silent, his gaze fixed on the truck as the weight of what they were seeing began to settle. The truck was in bad shape. It had been there for years, hidden and abandoned. The tires were flat, the windows were cracked, and the dust was thick, almost as if it had been deliberately left to disappear into the landscape. But it was the location of the truck that bothered Jackson the most. This wasn't a simple accident. It was flipped, pushed into a ravine, and buried under dirt and brush. "Something's wrong," Derek said softly, his voice tight. "This truck, it's like it was put here." Jackson's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the scene. "It was moved, I'm sure," he said, his eyes scanning the area around the vehicle. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of this. It wasn't here during the initial search. It can't be. Someone hid it. But why? Derek stepped out of the Jeep, his boots crunching on the dry desert earth as he approached the edge of the ravine. He leaned down to inspect the truck from a distance, his expression unreadable. But if it's been here all these years, why leave it now? "I don't know," Jackson muttered as he stepped out of the Jeep, his gaze fixed on the truck. "But I'm not leaving without answers." He approached the wreckage carefully, his steps slow and deliberate. An ominous silence hung in the air as the weight of the moment settled over them. The discovery was both a triumph and a terrifying realization. This was no accident. This wasn't just a car lost in time. This was proof. Proof of something far darker, something far worse than he could have ever imagined. Jackson walked over to the truck and crouched, brushing dust off the side of the vehicle. His fingers brushed against the familiar mountain sticker, the one he remembered so vividly. It gave him a chill. His mother had always loved that sticker. It was her symbol of adventure, of the places she wanted to show him and Lily, and now that same symbol marked the spot where they had disappeared. "Where are they?" Jackson whispered, the question burning inside him. Derek stood a few feet away, his eyes scanning the surrounding desert. "This is crazy, man. We have to call the police." "No," Jackson said quickly, his voice sharp with determination. "We need to check this place first. We need to know what happened to them." The realization hit Jackson harder than anything he'd ever felt. He had spent 11 years imagining his family's fate, hoping, praying that they had gotten lost and somehow survived. But this was no accident. This was no bad luck. Someone had done this. Someone had hidden the truck, and most likely, the truth along with it. The fear he had lived with for years suddenly became real. They weren't just gone. They were taken. Jackson's mind raced as he began to examine the truck more closely. He opened the door, half expecting it to creak or fall off its hinges, but it was intact, the handle slightly sticky from years of neglect. He peered inside, scanning the cab. There was nothing there. No sign of his mother or his sister. No sign of their things. It was as if they had simply vanished, leaving behind only the truck. Derek stepped back, watching Jackson with a worried expression. "We need to get back, man. This is too much for one night. We need help." But Jackson wasn't listening. His heart was pounding in his chest. He had to know what happened here. He couldn't just walk away again. This was it. This was the breakthrough he'd been waiting for. Jackson took a deep breath and turned to Derek. "Help me get to the truck. There's got to be something we're missing." The desert wind picked up, kicking up dust around them as they carefully approached the vehicle. But for Jackson, this wasn't about the truck anymore. This was about the truth. His mother, his sister. He was closer than ever to finding out what really happened, and he wouldn't stop until he found out. Jackson's heart was pounding as he looked down into the ravine. His eyes were drawn to the overturned truck, nestled between the rocks and brush of the desert. The familiar blue, orange, and green mountain sticker on the side of the vehicle sent a wave of recognition through him. That sticker, that truck, it belonged to his mother. He could hardly believe his eyes. Derek stood behind him, wiping sweat from his forehead as the desert heat pressed down on them. "Jackson, are you sure?" Derek's voice shook slightly, but more from worry than disbelief. He didn't know what to make of it. How could something like that have just been lying there untouched for over a decade? How could he find it now? Jackson didn't answer right away. His mind raced as he continued to stare at the truck below, as if forcing it to explain itself. His hands, slick with sweat, gripped the camera tightly. He took photo after photo, documenting everything. Even though he already knew what it meant, this was the breakthrough he'd been waiting for. This wasn't just a coincidence. He was sure of it. Jackson's eyes never left the truck. "I'm not going to the authorities yet, Derek. This is it. This is the lead we've been looking for." He could feel his hands shaking. They weren't just shaking from the adrenaline or the heat. They were shaking because this was real. His mother's disappearance, the countless sleepless nights, the years of unanswered questions. All of this might finally be cleared up. Derek, unsure of what to do next, glanced nervously at the truck and then at Jackson. "You believe this a lot, Jackson. I get it, man. You've been through hell all these years, but we need to think about this. What if you're wrong? What if this takes us somewhere we're not ready for?" Jackson's mind was racing with 1,000 questions. How did he get here? Who moved him? What was the real reason his mother and sister disappeared? He took one last look at the truck, his heart pounding, knowing that the next steps would take him into dangerous, uncharted territory. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. And whatever answers lay ahead, Jackson was ready to meet them. Jackson Carter's heart was pounding as he and Derek made their way back to civilization. Each step carried more weight than the last. The afternoon sun had begun to dip below the horizon and the air had begun to cool, but the desert heat still clung to their bodies, a constant reminder of the brutal search they'd just endured. Finding the truck had been both a shock and a relief to Jackson. But now that they'd found it, the reality of what it meant was beginning to sink in. Once they had a connection, Jackson wasted no time. His fingers shook as he dialed Detective Laura Hall. She'd been involved in the investigation when his mother and sister, Ellen and Lily, had disappeared all those years ago. Her voice crackled over the phone, sharp as he remembered. But there was something else now, a weariness, as if time had taken its toll on her too. "Detective Hall, this is Jackson. We found the truck," he said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. He could feel Derek's eyes on him. They were both hoping for a miracle. "Where exactly?" Detective Hall's voice was level, but Jackson could hear the soft rustle of pages turning in the background, as if she was already looking through old files. "In a ravine west of the Shinadi Mountains. I sent you the coordinates," Jackson said quickly, his words rushing out. "It's definitely my mom's truck. It still has her mountain sticker on it, but something's wrong. The truck, it's been there for a while." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Jackson could almost hear her processing the information. "I'll notify my team. Stay where you are, Jackson. "We'll be there soon," she said finally, her tone more urgent now. "Don't touch anything. Just wait for us." The minutes passed like hours as Jackson and Derek waited in the dusty desert, their nerves on edge. Finally, Detective Hall and her team arrived, a convoy of vehicles kicking up clouds of dust as they pulled into the area. Jackson watched as they quickly got to work, their movements efficient and methodical. He'd never felt more out of place in his life, but this was what he'd been looking for all these years. Answers, no matter how painful they might be. Detective Hall approached Jackson with a grim expression, her eyes scanning the truck. She stared at him for a long moment before turning toward him. "Jackson, I need to tell you something," she began, her voice low. "That truck wasn't here when we originally searched." Jackson's stomach clenched, his heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" "We've covered this area before. I was part of the search." "I know," Hall interrupted softly. "But this truck, the rust, the damage, it doesn't add up. It looks like it's been out in the desert for about 7 or 8 years. Jackson stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "So you're telling me it wasn't here when we searched all those years ago?" His voice was barely audible. "No," Hall replied, shaking her head. "It was moved on purpose. Someone put it here after the search efforts died down." A heavy silence fell between them. The desert wind picked up, kicking up dust around their feet as realization hit Jackson. The truck hadn't just been abandoned. It had been hidden, but why? And more importantly, who had hidden it? Jackson's mind raced. Could his mother and sister still be alive? Had they been abandoned somewhere, hidden in the desert, or worse, kidnapped by someone? His fists clenched at his sides. He'd mourned the loss of his family for years, but now it was all starting to fall apart in ways he never expected. "What happened to them, Detective?" Jackson asked, his voice shaking with emotion. "Why would someone hide a car like that? Was it an accident, or something worse?" Detective Hall looked down at the ground, her face unreadable. "I don't know yet, Jackson, but be careful out here. You're digging into something a lot darker than you realize. This isn't just a missing persons case anymore. Your mother and sister may not have been the only victims." A chill ran through Jackson. Was this really a lot bigger than he thought? Had his search for his family taken him to a place he couldn't handle? The tension in the air grew thicker as the search and rescue team continued to search the truck. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for more information. Then a voice broke the silence. "Detective, you need to see this," one of the forensics technicians called. Jackson and Detective Hall walked over to where the technician was kneeling next to the truck. There was a small, dusty case lodged under the seat. It was unmistakable. It was a drone case, just like the one his mother had. Jackson froze. "This is from Mom's drone," he muttered, kneeling next to the technician. He felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just a truck. This was evidence, a piece of his family's history that had been buried for too long. The technician carefully opened the case, revealing the remains of the drone. Jackson's hands shook as he reached for it, memories of his mother flying it on their family road trips flooding back. But it wasn't just the drone that caught his attention. There, inside the case, was a tiny micro SD card. It was slightly damaged, but intact. "There might be recordings on this card," Hall said, her voice shaking with anticipation. She took the card from Jackson's hands and handed it to another technician, who quickly inserted it into a laptop set up nearby. The screen flickered for a moment, then came to life, showing a series of videos. At first, it was just family footage. Jackson's mother and sister laughing and playing in the desert. There were shots of their campsite, then their truck, then the landscape. It all seemed so normal, so peaceful. But then the footage changed. In the final video, the drone's camera zoomed out, revealing a wide view of the surrounding desert, mountains looming in the distance, the sun beating down on cracked earth. But something was wrong. Jackson knew it immediately. This wasn't the area where his mother and sister had camped. They were much further away, deep in restricted territory, an area marked off-limits to civilians. Then the footage cut off abruptly, as if someone had switched it off. The screen went blank. Jackson's heart was pounding in his chest. What had they found there? Why was the drone filming so far outside the planned campsite? The implications couldn't be ignored. Someone had moved the truck after the initial search. Someone was behind their disappearance. And now Jackson had proof that his mother and sister weren't just lost or astray. They'd been kidnapped. Jackson's thoughts were a jumble of anger and confusion. The desert held more than just a truck. It held a terrible secret. His mother and sister were victims, but of what and who was behind it all? His obsession with finding his family had brought him to this point. But now, as the truth began to unravel, Jackson felt more lost than ever. The desert had given him answers, but it had also given him more questions. Questions that could be dangerous to uncover. "Detective Hall, we have to find out who did this," Jackson said, his voice filled with determination. "I can't just let this go. I need to know what happened to them. I need to know who took them." Hall placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression grim. "I understand, Jackson, but this isn't something you can handle alone. We have to tread carefully. Whatever this is, it's bigger than just your family." Jackson stared at the truck, the full weight of it all crashing down on him. His worst fears were coming true, but he couldn't stop now. He had to find out the truth, and no matter the cost, he would. Jackson had been chasing this truth for over a decade. With each passing year, his hope grew smaller, but it never faded. He had always known that something was wrong with the disappearance of his mother, Ellen, and sister, Lily. He wasn't going to give up, no matter how much time passed. But now that the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, everything seemed even more confusing than he could have imagined. The deeper Jackson and Detective Laura Hall dug into the case, the more disturbing the evidence became. The truck found in the ravine had not been there during the initial search. It became clear that someone had deliberately moved it, hiding it in plain sight. The discovery of Ellen's drone case and a strange recording showing a part of the desert where no one had searched led them to one chilling conclusion. Ellen and Lily had not disappeared by accident. They had stumbled into something dark, something dangerous. It was Laura who first connected the dots. She came across several disturbing leads, and after some investigation, she discovered that a local smuggling ring was operating in the very area where Jackson's family had disappeared. The smuggling ring was known to operate in remote areas of the desert, using abandoned properties as cover. It was a well-organized operation dealing in illegal goods, and they had no qualms about eliminating anyone who posed a threat to their business. Jackson's heart sank as the realization hit him. His mother, Ellen, had always been meticulous, always paying attention to detail, always following the rules. She knew the desert well. Maybe she had discovered something she shouldn't have. And when she did, she and Lily had paid for it. Jackson's thoughts raced as he sat in his car, staring out at the barren desert. The horizon stretched out before him. He had always believed that his mother and sister were still out there, somewhere. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but as the pieces of the puzzle began to make sense, the premonition of what might have happened to them weighed heavily on his chest. This wasn't just about closure anymore. This was about justice. This was about avenging their death. Laura had tracked the location of the smugglers' operation, a remote compound hidden deep in the desert's outskirts. She worked tirelessly with her team, gathering enough evidence to sanction a raid. But Jackson snuck in first. He needed to know. He needed to be the one to confront the people responsible for tearing his family apart. The compound was isolated, surrounded by harsh, dry terrain, with only one narrow road leading to it. As Jackson approached, he could feel his pulse quicken. The wind howled across the desert, kicking up dust around the compound. His truck was the only vehicle for miles. He stopped just outside the gates, his heart pounding. He knew what he was about to do could change everything, but there was no turning back. Jackson got out of the car, his boots crunching on the gravel as he walked toward the complex. He didn't know how many people were inside, but he knew they were dangerous. He had no idea what he was up against, but he couldn't sit back anymore. His mother and sister had been kidnapped. This had to mean something. He wasn't leaving until he knew the truth. His hand tightened on the gun at his waist. Its weight was familiar but uncomfortable. He never wanted to use it, but he didn't walk into this complex unprepared. He had no choice. As Jackson approached the main entrance, a man in a faded jacket and a grim expression stepped out of the shadows. His eyes narrowed when he saw Jackson. It was clear from the moment their eyes met that this man knew exactly who Jackson was. He had been waiting for it. "I'm surprised it took you so long," the man said, his voice low and calm, as if he was simply stating a fact, not something that should have set off alarm bells in Jackson's head. The man's words sank deep. He had been waiting for this moment for so long. But now, standing face to face with the man responsible for his family's tragic fate, it felt different, more real. The anger that had been smoldering for years now burned brightly inside him. But as the man's smirk faded, another expression appeared on his face, one of recognition. Jackson's confusion must have shown on his face because the man's smile widened and he took a step closer, gravel crunching under his boots, his eyes gleaming with something sinister. "You don't remember me, do you?" the man asked, his voice low, almost mocking. Jackson tensed, his breath catching in his throat. "Should I?" the man chuckled, his hands in his pockets as he looked Jackson over like he was prey, sizing him up. "Your face has been in the news for years, Carter. Your family's case has gotten a lot of attention. They were all over the headlines. That's how I knew who you were when you started digging. You were relentless." Jackson's blood ran cold. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, but they didn't make sense. "You saw my face on the news?" he asked, his voice barely audible. He struggled to comprehend the gravity of what the man implied. How could someone connected to this crime have been watching his every move? "Of course," the man replied, his eyes narrowing with satisfaction. "I was watching. Your mother and sister disappearing was an opportunity. See, your mother was smart, too smart. She started asking questions, sniffing around, digging in places she shouldn't have. But you were just a kid when this all started. A kid like your sister. You knew nothing of the dark side of this desert, of what went on in the shadows until you started making noise." Jackson's mind was racing. He remembered the early days of the search, the constant media coverage, the news vans parked on his family's street, reporters pressing him for answers he didn't have. But hearing that this man was watching him, that someone from the very operation that had kidnapped his sister and mother was following him, was like the final piece of the nightmare clicking into place. "They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time," the man continued, his voice colder. "They had no idea where they were going, and your mother was relentless. She wouldn't back down even when we told her. She thought she could turn things around, that she could stop us. She had no idea what she was up against." Jackson's heart pounded as the man's words hung in the air, a cold weight on him. He had been waiting for this moment for what seemed like an eternity. But now that he was face to face with the man responsible for his family's suffering, it was worse than he had ever imagined. The man didn't seem to care about the anger that flared in Jackson's eyes. He was too calm, almost enjoying the tension. Jackson's voice shook as he demanded the truth. "Where are they? What did you do to my mom and sister?" The man's lips curled into a dark, knowing smile. "You've been looking for them for a long time, haven't you? You really don't understand, do you?" Jackson's heart sank. He'd been afraid of something like this, but hearing it out loud was not what he was prepared for. He shook his head. What do you mean? They were. Tell me now. Jackson clenched his fists, trying to suppress the rage threatening to overwhelm him. You did it. You took them. You killed them. The man took a step closer, his eyes narrowing as he looked Jackson over. You really think they were just killed out there in the desert? Number, they were more valuable than that, Carter. So much more. Jackson gasped. What are you talking about? His mind raced, trying to process the words, but they didn't make sense. The man's smile widened, but it wasn't warm. There was no humanity to it. You see, your mother and sister weren't just victims of bad luck. Your mother got too close to something. She knew something was wrong, so she kept digging. Your sister was a part of this too. But they didn't die, Carter. They became assets. They were taken and used. Jackson's stomach twisted as the horrible truth began to sink in. Used for what? He didn't want to hear it, but he needed to know. The man didn't hesitate. They became part of our operation. We trafficked them, used them for things they were forced to agree to. Your mother thought she could change things, make a difference. But the truth is, she became just another tool for our exploitation. Your sister, too. We kept her a secret, raised her as our own. She had no choice. She became part of the system. Jackson's world felt like it was crumbling. His body went numb. The years of searching, the endless nights wondering what had happened, all the grief he'd carried with him, it all seemed to shatter in an instant. Stop it! Stop lying, Jackson whispered, unable to fully process what the man was saying. The man stepped forward, his voice even colder. It's true, Carter. Your mother and sister never died. They're still alive here, in this place, but you were too late to save them from what they became, from what they went through. Jackson's chest tightened, his head spinning as the man's words echoed in his mind again. They were alive. His mother Ellen, his sister Lily, they were alive. But what had been done to them? What horrors had they endured over the years? Do you think they're the same? The man's tone was almost pitiful. Your mother is a shadow of what she was. She's broken, just like your sister. They were beaten physically and mentally. They won't come back the way you remember them. Carter, you can't undo what happened to them. They're part of this now, part of this life. Jackson's heart felt like it was breaking. His fists clenched at his sides as the weight of the man's words crashed down on him. His family wasn't dead. They weren't killed, but they were lost. They'd been forced into a world so dark, so twisted, that he wasn't sure they'd ever return. Where are they? Jackson demanded again, his voice shaking. Where are they now? The man looked at him, something flickering in his eyes. A hint of amusement mixed with cold indifference. You want to see them? You want to know where they are? They're here, in this facility. You can see them if you want, but don't think for a second that you can just walk in and take them. They're part of us now. And once they're in, they stay in. Jackson's thoughts were scattered. He barely heard the man's words as he processed the stunning truth. His mother and sister, still alive but broken, had lived in a nightmare for over a decade. The thought of what they had gone through made Jackson's blood boil, and the grief and rage inside him became a powerful force. He was not going to let this man or his operation tear his family apart anymore. You think you own them? Jackson's voice was low, but filled with a dangerous calm. You don't. I'll get them back. I'll tear this place apart if I have to. The man laughed, the sound cutting through Jackson's ears. You think you can just come here and take them from me? You think I'm going to let this happen? Jackson's hands were shaking, but he kept his eyes on the man, his mind racing with everything he needed to do. He had to get them out, his mother and his sister. They had to be freed from this hell. I don't care what you think, Jackson said, his words firm and final. I'm taking them, and there's nothing you can do about it. The man stepped back, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. You're making a mistake, Carter. You don't know what you're getting into. Jackson didn't care. He'd come this far. He wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not when he was this close. Without another word, Jackson turned and headed for the entrance to the complex. The man called out something after him, but Jackson's focus was unwavering. He was done with fear, done with waiting. The truth was finally in his hands. He would not leave without his family. Inside, it wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for redemption, for his mother and sister who had been taken from him. He was going to destroy this place and bring them back, no matter the cost. Jackson's thoughts were focused on one thing: bringing his mother and sister home. After all the years of searching, the twists and turns of fate, the endless pain of not knowing what had happened to them, he finally had a chance to find them, to bring them back from whatever nightmare they were trapped in. But as Jackson delved deeper into the complex, the odds quickly turned against him. The crime ring wasn't going to just let him walk in and take his family. The people who had controlled his sister and mother for so long weren't going to let Jackson ruin their lives. As Jackson walked through the rusted gates, his heart was pounding. He knew what he had to do. But as he got closer, the sickening realization washed over him that this might be the end. The moment when everything would change forever hung in the air. Before he could even reach the building, the men who had taken his family attacked him from the shadows. They were fast, merciless. Before Jackson could react, they surrounded him, fists pounding him from all sides. The force of the blows stole his breath and left him stunned. Blood sprayed onto the ground as they took turns hitting him, giving him no chance to fight back. Pain seared through his body, each blow more brutal than the last. He thought of his mother, his sister. He had to keep going, but the pain was unbearable. He fell to the ground, unable to rise as the men surrounded him, continuing their assault. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, the sound of sirens blared through the complex. In a whirlwind of flashing lights and screams, the police stormed the complex. Detective Laura Hall and her team burst in, guns drawn, combing the building like a natural disaster. The criminals tried to flee, but they were quickly apprehended, their operations crumbling around them. Jackson's body shook with exhaustion and pain, but he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of relief. They would finally be stopped. His family would finally be free. While the police were busy securing the complex and arresting the remaining criminals, Jackson was rushed into an ambulance. He was battered, bloodied, but alive. The pain from the beating still radiated through his bones, but he fought to keep his eyes open, to stay conscious, to see the moment he had been waiting for. Soon, officers were escorting his mother and sister out of the complex. Jackson's heart sank when he saw them. Ellen, his mother, looked unrecognizable. The woman who had once been strong, vibrant, and full of life was now a shadow of her former self. Her eyes were empty, and her skin was pale, worn down by years of torture. Lily, his sister, was barely standing, her face blank, detached, as if everything that once made her had been drained from her. Jackson's legs buckled beneath him, and with the last of his strength he moved forward. He couldn't breathe, the air thick with everything he'd just seen. His sister was alive. His mother, despite everything, was still here. But she was broken, as shattered as their life had been. The emotional weight of seeing them, the realization of how much they'd been through and for how long, brought tears to his eyes. He ran toward them, his arms outstretched despite the pain. "Mum, Lily, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner." Lily didn't move at first. She said nothing. She just stared at him, as if she wasn't sure she could trust that this wasn't another nightmare. But then something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out to him, and when she did, Jackson hugged her tightly, not wanting to let go. Ellen, his mother, stood a few steps behind her, her face filled with the depth of her trauma. But when she saw Jackson, a glimmer of recognition appeared in her eyes too. Her hand shook as she extended it, and Jackson moved toward her. She was not the woman he had known, but she was his mother. And as they embraced, all the pain, all the suffering, and years of uncertainty came together in that one moment. The emotional reunion was a whirlwind of tears, grief, and the overwhelming relief of finally being free of the criminals who had held them captive. But the joy of reunion was tempered by the harsh reality of what they had been through. Jackson's mother, Ellen, was physically battered and emotionally devastated. His sister, Lily, was broken, pulled into a world she had no connection to. Both had been sold, used, manipulated, and damaged by those who sought to take advantage of them. They had survived, but they would never be the same. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new, something that would take time, patience, and healing. After the facility was cleared and the perpetrators arrested, Jackson and his family were taken to safety, a place where they could start over. The trauma they had endured would never be erased, but Jackson vowed to do whatever it took to help them rebuild their lives. It was a long road ahead, but they were together. They would go to therapy, learn to heal, learn to trust again, and learn to find peace amid the wounds they now carried. In the months that followed, Jackson watched as his mother and sister slowly began to come back to life. It wasn't easy. There were days of pain, days when the memories of what had happened seemed unbearable. But there were also moments of hope, of laughter, of rebuilding a family that had been torn apart. Therapy helped. The support of people who genuinely cared helped. But most of all, it was love. Jackson never stopped fighting for his family. He spent more than a decade searching for them, never giving up. And in the end, they were together again, changed, wounded, and broken in ways no one could truly understand. But they were home. And that in itself was a victory.